Welcome to Still Science Lab. Tonight, we will explore a terrifying discovery that threatens everything we thought we knew about existence as we uncover how CERN just found a flaw in the universe, a phantom particle that threatens to unravel the very fabric of reality. Before we descend into the dark, invisible depths of this cosmic anomaly, take a moment to ground yourself in the undeniable, heavy reality of your immediate surroundings. Feel the profound, invisible pull of gravity anchoring the heavy mass of your body to the earth beneath you. Press your hand against the wall beside your bed, or simply imagine picking up a heavy, cold, weathered stone from the edge of a winter river. Feel the absolute, unyielding, solid resistance pushing back against your skin. Listen to the steady, rhythmic, and reassuring draw of the air entering your lungs. The slow, reliable expansion and contraction of your chest that keeps the delicate, incredibly complex machinery of your biology in continuous motion. We navigate our entire lives firmly anchored to these profound, physical certainties. We build massive, towering cities of heavy steel and poured concrete, trusting absolutely in the unbending structural integrity of the materials. We lay our heads down in the quiet dark of the night, believing with our whole hearts that the world we wake up to will possess the exact same physical rules, the exact same density, and the exact same comforting, predictable solidity as the world we left behind when we closed our eyes. This visceral, tactile experience of the world is the absolute psychological foundation of human sanity. It is the quiet, unspoken guarantee from the cosmos that the universe is a stable, permanent, and reliable place. But when you strip away the comforting, evolutionary biases of your biological senses and peer into the deep, invisible architecture of matter, you discover a deeply unsettling, terrifying truth. That cold, heavy stone in your hand is not a solid object. The chair you are resting in, the metallic structures holding up the massive buildings around you, and the very calcium bones inside your own body are completely and utterly hollow. The sensation of solidity, the physical resistance you feel when you push against the world, is an incredibly convincing, masterful biological illusion. You have never actually touched a single object in your entire life. When your hand reaches out to grasp a stone, the atoms in your skin do not physically collide with the atoms of the rock. Instead, the invisible, swirling clouds of electrons surrounding your hand are violently repelled by the identical, negatively charged clouds of electrons surrounding the stone. The feeling of physical touch is nothing more than the invisible, energetic tension of electromagnetic repulsion. You are perpetually hovering, permanently suspended by a microscopic force field, interacting with a world that is composed almost entirely of absolute, terrifying emptiness. To truly comprehend the scale of this emptiness, you must imagine taking a single atom and expanding it to the massive, sprawling size of a grand cathedral. If the atom were that large, the actual, physical matter within it, the dense, heavy nucleus, would be nothing more than a tiny, singular grain of sand suspended alone in the very center of the vast, echoing darkness. Everything else, the entirety of the sprawling structure making up the world you see, is just empty space, governed by invisible fields of energy vibrating in the dark. The solid reality we trust so deeply is not a permanent physical construct. It is a temporary, highly delicate truce negotiated by microscopic forces we cannot even see. It is a precarious balancing act of quantum tensions, a fragile, mathematical agreement between elementary particles that constantly, silently hums in the void. For centuries, human science has slowly, methodically peeled back the heavy layers of this illusion. We refuse to be satisfied with the superficial deception of human perception. We built magnificent, highly complex mathematical theories to explain the invisible truth that holds the empty world together, and we forged massive, subterranean machines to physically test those theories. We accelerated fragments of atoms to the blinding speed of light, smashing them together in the cold dark simply to watch them violently shatter. We wanted to see the raw, unedited code of the cosmos. We believed that by smashing matter into its most fundamental, irreducible components, we would find a perfect, elegant, and entirely predictable foundation. We expected to find the ultimate, unbreakable rules that govern the universe, a flawless mathematical architecture that would definitively explain why the void chooses to manifest as a solid, habitable world. We sought deep psychological comfort in the idea that, beneath the terrifying emptiness of the atom, there was at least perfect, undeniable order. But in our relentless, arrogant pursuit of absolute certainty, humanity has just looked deeper into the void than ever before. We stared directly into the chaotic, superheated wreckage of shattered protons, desperately searching for the familiar, comforting signatures of the physical laws we had already written. We expected the universe to behave exactly as we had mathematically commanded it to. Instead, staring back at us from the abyss of the data, we found something that absolutely should not exist. We did not find the perfect, flawless harmony we had so confidently predicted. We found a crack in the fundamental foundation of reality. We found a profound, undeniable mathematical flaw that threatens to completely unravel the very fabric of existence. Hidden within the massive, sprawling petabytes of collision data, buried deep in the microscopic debris of the Large Hadron Collider, researchers have detected the ghostly, lingering signature of an impossible entity. It is an anomaly that defies all established logic, a rogue piece of physical information that entirely refuses to obey the sacred, heavily tested rules of our physical models. It is a phantom particle that behaves in a way that is mathematically forbidden by the very laws that keep our hollow world from collapsing into chaos. The temporary, delicate truce that holds the empty cathedral of the atom together relies entirely on the absolute predictability of these fundamental forces. Every single quark, every shifting electron, and every invisible force carrier must perfectly execute its highly specific, unchanging role in the dark. But this newly discovered phantom is a rogue variable, a glitch in the cosmic code that operates entirely outside of our human understanding. Its mere existence boldly suggests that the invisible forces maintaining the illusion of our solid reality are not absolute. They are flawed, incomplete, and potentially far more unstable than we ever dared to imagine. To realize that the foundational rules of the universe contain a physical flaw is to experience a profound, chilling sense of cosmic vertigo. It means that the unyielding stone, the heavy steel of our cities, and the steady rhythm of your own breathing are suspended over a much deeper, more chaotic abyss than we previously thought. The laws of physics are not a permanent, indestructible cage that perfectly contains the void. They are merely a localized, temporary pattern of behavior. If the elementary particles at the absolute bottom of reality are capable of breaking the rules, of behaving in ways that completely contradict the established mathematical order, then the very stability of the entire universe is called into question. The delicate, unseen truce holding your body together could theoretically be renegotiated, or worse, entirely broken at a moment's notice. We are forced to face the terrifying possibility that the cosmos is not a finished, stable product, but an ongoing, volatile experiment capable of aggressively rewriting its own rules in the dark without any warning. When we quietly contemplate the massive, existential weight of this broken illusion, we are forced to entirely reevaluate the deepest, most profound philosophical truths about the nature of the universe and the fundamental flow of information. We desperately want to believe that reality is an objective, solid structure, and that information is simply our passive observation of that permanent structure. We think of human mathematics and physics as a perfect, unbreakable mirror, perfectly reflecting the absolute truth of the cosmos. But the discovery of this phantom flaw reveals a far more haunting, majestic reality. Information is not just a passive description of the world. It is the fragile, vibrating substance of the world itself. The universe is a vast, boundless ocean of data, constantly trying to organize itself in the chaotic dark. What we perceive as physical matter, the heavy, solid objects we cling to for comfort, are merely temporary, localized agreements of active data processing. Reality is not a solid object. It is an ongoing, highly complex conversation between invisible fields of energy. And just like any massive, sprawling network of information, it is entirely susceptible to profound errors, to deep structural glitches, and to unexpected, rogue variables that openly defy the established syntax. The flaw we have found in the deepest layers of physics is not a failure of our massive machines, but a raw, unadulterated glimpse into the terrifying absolute freedom of the cosmos. The universe is not a perfect, finished equation written on a chalkboard. It is alive, chaotic, and relentlessly computing its own existence in the dark, bound by rules that are ultimately written in sand. You exist not as a solid, permanent fixture of the physical world, but as a beautiful, fleeting, and highly organized pattern of this vibrating cosmic data. The very fragility of the physical laws that hold you together makes your existence infinitely more precious. We are incredibly complex whispers of order, sustained in a universe that fundamentally allows for chaos and contradiction. Embrace the profound, beautiful terror of the hollow world. The comforting illusion of solidity may be shattered, but in its place, we are left with a far deeper, more mysterious connection to the boundless, computing void. Deep beneath the idyllic, quiet surface of the European countryside, hidden away from the gentle sunlight and the sprawling, living forests of the Swiss-French border, lies the most complex, massive, and ambitious structure ever conceived by the human mind. We must leave the comforting familiarity of the biological world behind and descend into the cold, unyielding bedrock of the earth to truly understand the sheer scale of our own scientific hubris. Here, buried in the lightless rock, sits a marvel of modern engineering that completely defies the natural order of the planet. It is the Large Hadron Collider, the beating, mechanical heart of the European Organization for Nuclear Research. But to simply call this sprawling, subterranean complex a machine is a profound understatement of its terrifying majesty. It is not merely a tool, it is a massive, subterranean cathedral of metal, a circular shrine spanning 27 kilometers in circumference, constructed with absolute, unforgiving precision. We did not build this colossal structure to passively observe the passing of time or to worship a silent, distant deity. We built it to violently and aggressively interrogate the cosmos. We built it to drag the deepest, most inaccessible secrets of reality out of the dark void and force them into the harsh, blinding light of human measurement. This cathedral of metal is an architecture of extremes, entirely isolated from the natural world above. To ensure the absolute purity of its violent operations, the vast, circular tunnels of the collider enclose a vacuum that is mathematically emptier than the desolate, freezing expanses of interstellar space. The thousands of massive, superconducting electromagnets that line the ring are meticulously chilled by flowing liquid helium, plunging their temperatures to a staggering 271 degrees below 0 Celsius, rendering them colder than the dark, empty voids between distant galaxies. It is a synthetic, perfectly controlled pocket of absolute nothingness, engineered specifically to host the most unnatural, extreme, and violent events in the modern universe. The thousands of brilliant, white-coated minds who walk its sterile corridors are the high priests of our modern age, speaking a dense, impenetrable language of pure mathematics, seeking the ultimate, unifying truth of existence hidden deep within the cold steel. In our desperate, relentless quest to understand the foundation of reality, we do not simply look at matter, we annihilate it. The operation of the Large Hadron Collider is an act of pure, calculated, and breathtaking violence. Into this frozen, perfectly silent circular vacuum, we inject incredibly thin, invisible beams of protons, the heavy, stable hearts of hydrogen atoms. Once these microscopic fragments of reality are inside the ring, the machine awakens. Using massive, perfectly timed pulses of electromagnetic energy, we whip these invisible particles around the 27-kilometer track, pushing them faster and faster, driving them to a terrifying, almost incomprehensible velocity. We accelerate these protons to 99.99999% the speed of light. At this unimaginable speed, the particles are racing through the dark circular tunnel thousands of times every single second. They cease to be simple building blocks of matter and are transformed into lethal, heavy payloads of raw kinetic energy, straining against the absolute limits of relativistic physics. And then, at highly specific, heavily fortified intersection points surrounded by massive, towering detectors that weigh more than the Eiffel Tower, we commit the ultimate act of physical disruption. We use powerful magnetic lenses to pinch the beams, forcing these opposing swarms of hyper-accelerated protons to violently cross paths. We deliberately smash the fundamental building blocks of reality head-on into each other. In the exact, blinding fraction of a nanosecond of that collision, we generate a localized apocalypse. The impact creates microscopic fireballs with temperatures hundreds of thousands of times hotter than the boiling golden core of the sun itself. We are not just breaking atoms apart, we are temporarily melting the very fabric of physical law. In the heart of that terrifying, microscopic inferno, we perfectly recreate the absolute, churning chaos of the Big Bang. We synthesize the exact, unimaginable conditions that existed mere fractions of a second after the universe was born out of the dark. The stable, comforting, and familiar architecture of matter is violently ripped away, leaving only a screaming, chaotic plasma of pure, primordial energy. From this momentary, absolute destruction, new, incredibly heavy, and highly unstable particles briefly flicker into existence, leaving their ghostly, spiraling signatures in the silicon layers of the detectors before instantly decaying back into the void. It is absolutely vital to understand the deep, psychological motive behind this immense, violent undertaking. Humanity did not spend billions of dollars, mine thousands of tons of metal, and dedicate decades of relentless, obsessive engineering to break the universe. We did not construct this cold, subterranean cathedral to find flaws, errors, or chaos in the cosmic code. We built it to confirm our own brilliance. We constructed this massive, violent interrogator to validate the perfect, flawless understanding we firmly believed we already possessed. Over the past century, generations of brilliant physicists had meticulously crafted a beautiful, elegant, and mathematically rigorous framework of reality known as the Standard Model. It was our ultimate masterpiece, a rulebook that cleanly dictated exactly how every single quark, electron, and force carrier must behave in the dark. We wanted the Large Hadron Collider to provide the final, undeniable stamp of approval on that masterpiece. We expected the machine to dutifully catalogue the wreckage of the smashed protons and find exactly what our human mathematics had confidently predicted, down to the absolute last decimal point. We wanted the universe to look at our equations and obediently agree. We built the most violent, powerful machine in human history not to shatter reality, but to confidently put a final, triumphant period at the end of the human scientific narrative. We wanted the comforting closure of absolute certainty. When we contemplate the sheer, staggering scale of this violent interrogation and the intense hubris that fueled its creation, we are forced to confront profound philosophical insights into the very nature of the universe and the fundamental flow of information. We hold a deeply ingrained, almost romantic belief that knowledge is something gently and passively gathered. We think of information as a quiet, undisturbed artifact waiting patiently in the dark to be dusted off, catalogued, and read by an observing mind. We believe that to understand the cosmos, we simply need to look closer, to listen harder, and to passively observe the world in its natural, resting equilibrium. We assume that reality wants to be understood, that it will willingly surrender its deep structural logic to anyone with a powerful enough microscope or a large enough telescope. But the brutal, annihilating architecture of the Large Hadron Collider reveals a vastly different, deeply humbling, and entirely terrifying truth about the mechanics of reality. True, foundational information is not freely given by the cosmos. It is fiercely, aggressively, and heavily guarded by the very structure of matter itself. The universe is not a passive, open library waiting to be read. It is a locked, incredibly dense, and heavily armored vault. To read the deepest, most fundamental code of existence, we cannot simply observe from a distance. We must actively destroy. We must apply immense, unnatural, and overwhelming force to break the stable configurations of reality just to catch a fleeting, microscopic glimpse of the underlying data. Information, at its most fundamental cosmic level, is intrinsically tied to violence and physical transformation. It requires the catastrophic shattering of order to reveal the raw, unedited syntax of the void. The universe actively resists our understanding with the heavy, unyielding bonds of the physical world, fiercely maintaining its secrets in the cold, silent stability of everyday matter. By smashing protons at the speed of light, we are undeniably proving that reality is stubbornly encrypted. The knowledge we extract from the chaotic, superheated wreckage of the detectors is not a peaceful revelation willingly handed down from the heavens. It is a forced confession, dragged out of the cosmos under the extreme duress of absolute physical violence. We are not just readers of the cosmic text, we are forceful interrogators, demanding answers from a universe that violently prefers to keep its true nature locked away in the dark. This forces us to realize that the very act of knowing is an act of profound, irreversible disruption. Information is not a peaceful reflection of reality. It is the chaotic, screaming debris left behind when we violently demand that the universe explain itself, reminding us that the deepest truths of existence can only be illuminated by the brilliant, terrifying fires of absolute destruction. To exist as a conscious being in an infinite, sprawling cosmos is to be constantly besieged by the terror of chaos. We look up at the violent, burning stars. We witness the devastating unpredictability of earthly storms, and we feel the relentless, degrading pull of time upon our own fragile bodies. In the face of this overwhelming, seemingly random universe, the human mind desperately craves structure. We cannot survive psychologically in a world without absolute rules. And so, for thousands of years, we have relentlessly sought to tame the dark. We categorized the shifting constellations, we mapped the wandering paths of the planets, and we ground glass lenses to bring the blurry, distant heavens into sharp, predictable focus. But the ultimate triumph of human order did not come from looking up into the vastness of space. It came from looking down, deep into the microscopic, invisible heart of matter itself. In the latter half of the 20th century, through sheer intellectual force and staggering mathematical brilliance, humanity constructed a masterpiece of logic. We built a framework so elegant, so comprehensive, and so seemingly perfect that it transcended the realm of mere scientific theory. It became the ultimate, unyielding rulebook of reality. We called it the Standard Model of Particle Physics. To call the Standard Model a theory is a profound understatement of its power and its absolute authority. It is the foundational operating system of the cosmos, meticulously translated into the rigid language of human mathematics. It is an unforgiving dictionary that dictates exactly how every single piece of matter in the universe must behave, how it must interact, and how it must ultimately decay in the dark. The Standard Model asserts that the staggering, bewildering complexity of the world around us, the heavy, rusted iron of the Earth, the violently burning plasma of the Sun, and the incredibly delicate, wet chemistry of your own beating heart is entirely an illusion of scale. Beneath this overwhelming physical diversity, the rulebook demands strict, absolute simplicity. It declares that everything, absolutely everything, is constructed from just a handful of fundamental, indivisible building blocks, bound together by a strictly defined set of invisible forces. It categorizes reality into a neat, periodic table of fundamental particles. The quarks that bind tightly together in the dark to form the heavy core of the atom, the leptons, like the electron that nervously orbit the edge of the void, and the fundamental force carriers, the microscopic messengers that ceaselessly negotiate the physical interactions between them all. According to the rulebook, there are no exceptions. There is no magic, no chaos, and no room for rebellion. Every interaction in the universe, from the majestic birth of a galaxy to the silent death of a single cell, is strictly governed by the ironclad syntax of this mathematical model. For decades, This flawless rulebook reigned supreme, and its reign was completely, undeniably justified by an unprecedented streak of breathtaking prophetic successes. In the realm of theoretical physics, the Standard Model did not merely explain the particles we had already found. It confidently and arrogantly pointed into the empty dark and demanded the existence of particles we had never even imagined. It was a mathematical oracle. When the equations revealed a structural imbalance, the model predicted the exact mass and charge of missing quarks. Years later, when we built machines powerful enough to shatter the atom and look inside, those exact quarks were found, waiting patiently in the wreckage, perfectly matching the mathematical prophecy. The model accurately predicted the existence of the weak nuclear force carriers, the heavy, highly unstable particles responsible for radioactive decay, decades before they were finally captured and measured in a physical detector. It was a flawless winning streak that defied all historical precedent. The rulebook was, quite simply, never wrong. The ultimate, crowning vindication of this architecture came with the desperate, decades-long hunt for the Higgs boson. The Standard Model had a singular, glaring mathematical gap. It could not explain why matter possessed mass. Why does a stone feel heavy while a particle of light weighs absolutely nothing? The rulebook demanded the existence of an invisible, universe-spanning field, a thick, cosmic molasses that clings to certain particles and gives them physical weight, and it predicted that this field must have a corresponding fundamental particle. For half a century, the Higgs boson was a ghost, a purely mathematical necessity that stubbornly evaded all physical detection. But the model demanded it must be there. When the Large Hadron Collider was finally powered on, driving protons together at the speed of light, it was the ultimate, violent test of the rulebook. And in the summer of 2012, from the chaotic, superheated plasma of 1 trillion microscopic collisions, the Higgs boson briefly, violently flickered into existence. The machine confirmed the math. The final, elusive piece of the puzzle snapped perfectly into place. The rulebook was complete. This unparalleled, unbroken chain of predictive triumphs birthed a profound, intoxicating, and ultimately blinding arrogance within the modern scientific consciousness. We began to believe our own myth. We looked at the beautifully balanced equations of the Standard Model and convinced ourselves that we had achieved the impossible. We truly believed that we had deciphered the final, complete alphabet of the cosmos. We assumed that the foundational architecture of reality was a closed loop, a finished puzzle, and that we held the box with the picture on the cover. We thought that the grand, terrifying mystery of existence had been definitively solved at the microscopic level, and that the only task left for future generations of physicists was simply to measure the known constants with slightly more precision. We equated our human mathematics with the absolute truth of the universe, forgetting that a map, no matter how flawlessly drawn and intricately detailed, is never the actual territory. We believed we had cornered the infinite void and forced it to sign a binding contract with human logic. We stood upon our perfect cathedrals of metal, looked out into the sprawling, chaotic dark of the cosmos, and arrogantly declared that there were no more fundamental secrets left to be found, completely unaware that the universe was quietly preparing to shatter our perfect illusion. When we confront the overwhelming psychological weight of this flawless rulebook and the blinding arrogance it inspired, we are forced to reevaluate the deepest philosophical truths about the nature of the universe and the fundamental flow of information. We desperately seek to contain the cosmos within the rigid, unyielding borders of our equations. We view information as a static, permanent architecture, a fixed set of laws that reality must blindly and endlessly obey. We believe that to name a thing, to assign it a mathematical value, and place it within a structured grid is to establish absolute dominion over it. But the universe is not a rigid text waiting to be decoded, and information is not a sterile, unchanging commodity. Information is the chaotic, churning, and relentlessly fluid substance of existence itself. To believe that we had captured the entire alphabet of reality was to fundamentally misunderstand the infinite, generative power of the void. The cosmos does not write its laws in permanent ink. It is an endlessly expanding, violently computing engine that is constantly translating, mutating, and rewriting its own physical nature in the dark. Our flawless rulebook, our beautiful standard model, was never the absolute truth. It was merely a temporary, localized translation, a narrow, highly specific lens through which we viewed a tiny fraction of a sprawling, incomprehensible whole. We confused the limits of our perception with the absolute limits of reality. True wisdom requires the terrifying realization that information is boundless, and that the universe will always, inevitably, produce phenomena that absolutely refuse to fit inside the cages we construct. We must learn to embrace the profound humility of knowing that our finest models, our most elegant equations, are nothing more than beautiful, fragile approximations floating precariously upon an infinite, fathomless ocean of data that we have only just begun to touch. To truly grasp the magnitude of the anomaly, one must first understand the staggering, almost incomprehensible volume of information that flows through the subterranean veins of the Large Hadron Collider. When the particle beams cross and the protons violently annihilate each other, they do not produce a neat, easily readable printout of their internal components. They create a massive, chaotic digital tsunami. The towering, multi-story detectors surrounding the collision points are effectively taking 40 million three-dimensional, high-resolution photographs every single second. This generates a torrent of raw data, so overwhelmingly massive and fiercely rapid that no array of physical hard drives on the planet could possibly store it all. To manage this relentless digital deluge, the facility relies on automated, highly complex algorithms acting as ruthless gatekeepers. These supercomputers instantaneously sift through the wreckage in real time, discarding the vast majority of the collisions as mundane, expected physics, and saving only the microscopic fraction of events that seem mathematically interesting. The data that finally trickles down to the human researchers, though still measured in sprawling petabytes, is a highly filtered, deeply refined echo of the initial violence. For years, this refined data stream was a source of profound, grounding comfort to the scientific community. It was a predictable, steady confirmation of the established rules, a digital tapestry that perfectly matched the mathematical blueprints drawn up by generations of brilliant physicists. The data was a pristine mirror, and the reflection it offered was exactly the universe we expected and demanded to see. But buried deep within this sprawling, dark ocean of ones and zeros, a shadow began to form. It did not announce itself with a catastrophic alarm, a sudden power failure, or a dramatic mechanical breakdown of the subterranean machinery. It appeared as the most subtle, unassuming whisper in the dark. In the esoteric, highly mathematical language of particle physics, discoveries are rarely seen directly by the human eye. They are inferred from the energetic debris left behind in the vacuum. Researchers look for accumulations of specific decay products, searching for a sudden, unexpected peak rising above the smooth, predictable background noise of the collision graphs. At first, the anomaly was just a tiny, insignificant statistical fluctuation. It was a minor accumulation of events at a highly specific energy level that slightly exceeded the strict mathematical predictions of the established rulebook. In any incredibly complex system, tiny fluctuations are entirely normal and completely expected. They are the digital equivalent of a mote of dust settling on a camera lens, or a passing gust of wind shaking the mirror of a terrestrial telescope. The initial reaction of the global scientific community was not shock, awe, or panic, but routine, practiced dismissal. It was universally assumed to be a temporary ghost in the machine, a fleeting alignment of random statistical chance that would inevitably smooth itself out and quietly disappear into the background as millions more collision events were collected and added to the massive pile. But the ghost stubbornly refused to fade. As the weeks slowly turned into months, and as millions more proton collisions were meticulously recorded, ruthlessly filtered, and obsessively analyzed, the tiny fluctuation did not flatten out into the expected, comforting background noise. Instead, it grew. It sharpened its edges. It began to solidify from a hazy, ignorable statistical artifact into a towering, undeniable spike on the monitors. It was accumulating data points with a relentless, terrifying consistency that completely defied the laws of probability. This is the exact moment when routine scientific curiosity morphs into acute, highly focused paranoia. When a graph displays a prominent spike that the foundational rulebook of reality absolutely dictates should not be there, the immediate assumption of the human mind is never that the universe is broken. The desperate assumption is that the human machinery is flawed. A grueling, agonizing process of self-interrogation began within the facility. Teams of exhausted physicists, engineers, and data scientists tore through the physical and digital architecture of the collider, desperately searching for the error that would explain away the impossible. They looked for microscopic, physical misalignments in the thousands of superconducting magnets. They checked for infinitesimal temperature fluctuations in the sprawling liquid helium cooling systems. They audited millions of lines of complex filtering code, hunting for a rogue algorithm, a misplaced decimal point, or a corrupted file that might be artificially manufacturing the phantom signal. They actively and aggressively tried to murder their own data. Yet, the more violently they attacked the anomaly, the stronger and more unyielding it became. Every single exhaustive diagnostic test returned the exact same chilling verdict. The machine was operating with absolute, flawless perfection. The physical detectors were pristine, the filtering algorithms were completely unbiased, and the energy calibrations were exact. The anomaly was definitively not a mechanical error. It was not a miscalibration, a hidden software glitch, or a trick of the digital light. It was absolutely real. From the chaotic, superheated wreckage of the shattered protons, a repeated, undeniable mathematical impossibility was screaming into the void. The pristine data was clearly showing an unknown particle, or an unknown, terrifying force, manifesting at an energy level that the standard model explicitly and unconditionally forbade. It was as if a researcher had dropped a heavy stone, and instead of falling downward to the earth, the stone had simply hovered in the air, mocking the fundamental, unbreakable law of gravity. The spike in the data was a physical event occurring millions of times over, blatantly violating the sacred, established mathematical symmetries of the cosmos. It was a rogue, untamed variable operating entirely outside the boundaries of human knowledge, treating the flawless, revered rulebook of modern physics as if it were completely and utterly irrelevant. As the crushing reality of this indestructible spike settled over the global scientific community, the initial atmosphere of eager, restless curiosity rapidly curdled into a heavy, suffocating dread. The sprawling halls of universities and the glowing subterranean control rooms grew quiet, filled with hushed, incredibly anxious conversations. This was not the joyous, celebratory thrill of a predicted discovery, like the triumphant, long-awaited capture of the Higgs boson. That discovery had been a validation, a comforting, beautiful confirmation that humanity was on the right path, reading the correct map. This was something entirely different. This was a terrifying unraveling. The persistent spike in the data was a dark harbinger of chaos. It meant that the beautiful, elegant equations that physicists had dedicated their entire lives to mastering, the formulas that described the very bedrock of existence, were fundamentally incomplete, or vastly worse, completely wrong. The dread stemmed from the sudden, chilling realization that the solid, dependable ground of scientific certainty was rapidly crumbling beneath their feet. If this phantom particle could exist in direct, arrogant defiance of the rules, then what other monstrous, unknown, and destructive forces were lurking just out of sight in the dark sector of the universe? The pristine, brightly illuminated map of reality that humanity had so proudly drawn was suddenly bordered by a vast, terrifying terra incognita. The ghost in the data was a relentless, echoing reminder that the universe had never actually been tamed by our intellect. When we stare into the unforgiving reality of this persistent, impossible spike, we are forced to confront the deepest, most profound philosophical insights into the true nature of the universe and the fundamental behavior of information. We walk through our brief lives heavily biased by our own desperate psychological need for order. We construct elaborate, highly structured models of reality, and we quickly begin to treat those models not as mere tools of translation, but as the absolute, objective territory itself. We believe that information is a tame, domestic commodity, something that will obediently and passively conform to the rigid categories and the beautiful equations we have specifically designed to hold it. We assume that if we build a perfect, flawless machine, the universe will passively provide perfect, predictable answers. But the ghost in the data shatters this comforting, arrogant illusion entirely. Information, in its purest, most fundamental cosmic state, is not a polite guest willing to sit quietly within the narrow confines of our human logic. It is a wild, untamed, and relentlessly aggressive force. The universe does not care about the elegance of our mathematics, the beauty of our perceived symmetries, or the deep psychological comfort we derive from a completed rulebook. The cosmos is a sprawling, infinite engine of computation that operates on an architecture so incredibly vast, chaotic, and alien that our finest scientific models are nothing more than childish sketches drawn in the shifting sand. The persistent spike emerging from the shattered protons is not a glitch. It is the raw, unedited voice of reality, violently pushing back against our artificial boundaries. It is the cosmos, actively, aggressively asserting its own terrifying freedom. We must embrace the profound, chilling reality that true information is often highly destructive. It does not always gently build upon what we already know. Sometimes it arrives specifically to annihilate our deepest, most cherished certainties. The mathematical impossibility screaming from the data is a necessary, beautiful trauma. It forces our consciousness to accept that the universe is not a finished puzzle waiting patiently to be admired, but an endless, churning ocean of chaotic data that will always, inevitably, produce phenomena that completely break our fragile understanding. You and the complex world you inhabit are part of this wild, unpredictable data stream. Relish the terrifying mystery of the broken rulebook, for it undeniably proves that the cosmos is still alive, still intensely dangerous, and infinitely more magnificent than the narrow, predictable cages we have desperately tried to place it in. When we speak of fundamental particles, our minds naturally, almost unavoidably, default to the comforting physical analogy of tiny, solid spheres, microscopic, indestructible marbles bouncing aggressively against each other in the dark. But the quantum realm completely and utterly rejects this simplistic biological intuition. In the deepest, most fundamental layers of reality, there are no solid objects, there are no hard surfaces, no tangible boundaries, and nothing that the human hand could ever truly grasp. Instead, there are only sprawling, invisible, and infinite oceans of energy known as quantum fields. A particle is nothing more than a momentary, localized ripple within one of these vast, underlying oceans. It is a brief, mathematical vibration, a sudden concentration of energy that flickers briefly into existence, interacts with the world, and then violently fades back away into the static. The impossible spike, isolated in the petabytes of collision data, was not a measurement of a heavy, solid object crashing into a mechanical detector. It was the fleeting, echoing signature of a ghost. It was a completely unknown vibration resonating fiercely through the quantum field. A phantom particle that briefly materialized from the superheated, apocalyptic chaos of the shattered protons before instantly decaying back into the freezing void. This phantom does not belong to the established family of known matter. It is a total stranger in our universe, an alien ripple that carries the terrifying, inescapable implication of entirely unknown physics operating silently, constantly, just beneath the surface of our perceived reality. To desperately understand the profound existential threat this phantom poses to our beautifully constructed models, theoretical physicists have scoured the extreme mathematical fringes of quantum mechanics, pulling incredibly complex, hypothetical monsters from the dark. Some suspect this ghost is a heavily theorized, terrifying entity known as a leptoquark. In the rigid, uncompromising hierarchy of the Standard Model, the building blocks of reality are strictly and permanently segregated. Leptons like the familiar, lightweight electron that powers our modern world, and quarks, the incredibly heavy, dense building blocks locked away inside the core of the proton, are distinct, fundamental families of matter. They do not mix. They are separated by an absolute, unyielding physical boundary established at the very dawn of time. A leptoquark is a horrifying hybrid, a particle that acts as a forbidden, physical bridge between these two separate, isolated domains. It possesses the terrifying capability to seamlessly and violently transform a quark directly into a lepton, completely blurring the absolute, categorized boundaries of reality. Other brilliant minds whisper that the anomaly might not be a building block of matter at all, but rather a dark boson, a completely new, unrecognized kind of force carrier. Just as the photon carries the electromagnetic force that illuminates our world and allows us to see the stars, a dark boson would be the silent, heavy messenger of a completely unknown fifth fundamental force. It would be a force that operates entirely in the shadows, entirely indifferent to our light and our chemistry, orchestrating massive physical interactions in a dark sector of the universe that physically overlaps with our own, yet remains entirely invisible to our human instruments. Whatever the true, monstrous identity of this phantom might ultimately be, its behavior within the wreckage of the collider reveals a chilling, undeniable rebellion against one of the most sacred, foundational laws of modern physics. Within the pristine, heavily guarded architecture of the Standard Model, there exists a beautifully elegant, mathematically perfect principle known as lepton universality. This principle is the absolute democratic law of the quantum world. It strictly dictates that the fundamental forces of the universe must treat all leptons with exact, unwavering equality. To the weak nuclear force, which governs the slow decay of atoms, and the electromagnetic force, which binds molecules together, an electron and its much heavier, highly unstable cosmic cousins, the muon and the tau, must be completely, mathematically identical in how they interact. They are considered exact copies of each other, differing only in their physical resting mass. This universal fairness, this absolute symmetry, is the heavy glue that holds the predictive power of our entire physics together. It is a strict, unyielding rule that ensures the universe behaves with a consistent, reliable, and predictable logic across all scales. The rulebook explicitly demands that if you swap a lightweight electron for a heavy muon in a fundamental subatomic reaction, the underlying mathematical outcome, the frequency of the decay, must remain completely, perfectly unchanged. But the phantom particle completely, aggressively shatters this sacred symmetry. As the researchers meticulously analyze the decay paths of the collision data, carefully tracking the invisible footprints left by the ghost in the silicon detectors, they witnessed a blatant, terrifying favoritism. The phantom was not treating the leptons equally. It was interacting with the heavier muons at a drastically different, highly elevated rate than it was interacting with the lighter electrons. It was actively distinguishing between them, judging their mass, and playing by a completely alien set of physical rules. This is not just a minor mathematical discrepancy to be rounded away. It is a profound, structural violation of the cosmic order. The phantom particle acts as a rogue agent within the quantum field. It is moving through the absolute bedrock of reality, encountering the fundamental forces and communicating with them in a language that our standard model simply cannot read and was never built to understand. It is executing a hidden, complex cosmic code, quietly orchestrating subatomic reactions that are strictly, explicitly forbidden by the established human rulebook. To witness this rogue behavior in the raw data is to suddenly realize that our human mathematics has only deciphered a tiny, localized, and highly specific dialect of the universe, while a vastly more complex, incredibly alien language is being spoken right in front of us in the dark. When we quietly confront the terrifying reality of this rogue, phantom particle and the broken symmetry it violently leaves in its wake, we are forced to entirely reevaluate the deepest, most profound philosophical truths about the nature of the universe and the fundamental concept of information. We are deeply, psychologically conditioned to view the cosmos as a transparent, ultimately knowable system. We believe that information is something that naturally wants to be uncovered. We assume that the physical laws of the universe are universal, objective truths just waiting patiently in the void to be translated into human equations. We hold on to the comforting assumption that if we simply build a larger machine or look closely enough at the data, the underlying logic of reality will eventually make perfect, elegant sense. We view the unknown not as a permanent state, but simply as an empty space on our map, waiting to be inevitably filled in with the exact same familiar, comforting ink we use to draw the rest of the physical world. But the existence of the phantom particle reveals a universe that is fundamentally, structurally, and unapologetically opaque. It proves that information in the cosmos is not a single, unified text written for our specific benefit. The universe is a sprawling, infinitely layered cryptography engine, and it actively utilizes different, completely incompatible mathematical languages to govern different domains of reality. The laws we have painstakingly discovered, the beautiful symmetries we have so proudly and arrogantly codified over the last century, are not the absolute boundaries of existence. They are merely the local rules of our specific, limited dimensional neighborhood. The rogue phantom is a heavy, chilling reminder that there are profound, massive layers of cosmic information that are actively excluded from our understanding. There are entire architectures of logic, entire staggering systems of physics that operate right through our own bodies, influencing the very atoms of our blood, yet remain forever locked behind the impenetrable wall of an alien syntax. We are not the ultimate decoders of reality, destined to understand the entire machine. We are merely isolated, highly complex biological patterns trying to listen to an infinite, overlapping symphony of cosmic data, capable of hearing only the narrowest, faintest sliver of the actual frequencies. The rogue agent moving invisibly through the quantum field is undeniable proof that the universe is not obligated to be simple, it is not obligated to be universally fair, and it is certainly not obligated to be understood by the human mind. The cosmos contains entire encyclopedias of information that we do not have the sensory or intellectual organs to ever read. As you rest in the quiet stillness, let go of the exhausting, arrogant need to hold the entire cosmos within the rigid, unyielding cage of total human comprehension. Embrace the deep, terrifying majesty of a universe that is infinitely larger, infinitely stranger, and beautifully more chaotic than our finest, most perfect models could ever predict. The true, enduring beauty of existence is not found in the final, perfect equation, but in the boundless, silent, and relentlessly computing dark that will always, inevitably, transcend our understanding. We look up at the sprawling canopy of the night sky, mesmerized by the brilliant, piercing light of the stars, and we are easily, almost willingly, seduced by a profound optical illusion. We have been conditioned by millions of years of biological evolution to implicitly trust our eyes. We believe that if a thing is real, it must interact with light. It must glow with the fierce heat of nuclear fusion, or it must reflect the rays of a distant sun, or it must at least block the light and cast a heavy, undeniable shadow. We survey the majestic, spiraling arms of the Milky Way, the sprawling nebulae burning in vibrant hues of crimson and violet, and the countless, glittering galaxies scattered across the deep void, and we arrogantly assume that we are looking at the universe in its entirety. We think of this luminous, tangible matter, the protons, neutrons, and electrons that forge the stars, the planets, and our own fragile bodies as the main event of reality. But the cold, unforgiving mathematics of astrophysics has known for nearly a century that our eyes are lying to us. The glowing, visible matter that we so deeply cherish and relentlessly study is not the grand architecture of the cosmos. It is merely a bright, insignificant dusting of snow resting upon the surface of a massive, invisible mountain. There is a heavy, terrifying ghost haunting the cosmos, an unseen leviathan whose immense gravity dictates the movement of every star and the shape of every galaxy. We call it dark matter. For decades, dark matter has been the most profound, heavy mystery of the universe. It is a cosmic paradox that completely defies human intuition. When astrophysicists meticulously measure the rotational speeds of distant, spiraling galaxies, they confront a mathematical impossibility. The visible stars at the outer edges of these galaxies are moving with such terrifying, chaotic velocity that the centrifugal force should violently tear the galaxy apart, flinging the burning stars out into the freezing, empty void. The total mass of all the glowing gas, the heavy planets, and the billions of burning suns is simply not enough to generate the gravitational glue required to hold the spinning structure together. Yet, the galaxies do not fly apart. They remain intact, bound tightly by the overwhelming gravitational grip of something massive, something heavy, and something utterly, completely invisible. Dark matter does not emit light. It does not reflect light. It does not absorb light. It is entirely transparent to the entire electromagnetic spectrum, rendering it completely immune to the probing gaze of our most sophisticated telescopes. We have never seen it, we have never touched it, and we have never captured a single, undeniable particle of it in a laboratory. We only know it exists because we can feel its massive, crushing weight bending the very fabric of space and time. The discovery of the phantom particle inside the superheated wreckage of the Large Hadron Collider offers a terrifying, breathtaking possibility that promises to shatter our fundamental understanding of this unseen leviathan. For years, we naively assumed that dark matter might just be a single, heavy, inert particle, a boring, featureless anchor drifting silently in the void. But the rogue behavior of the phantom particle, its blatant violation of the established symmetries, and its refusal to communicate in the language of our physical models, points toward a far more complex, deeply unsettling reality. This impossible anomaly in the data might be our very first microscopic glimpse into what theoretical physicists call the dark sector. The phantom particle may not be just a stray piece of rogue mass. It could be the physical, chaotic bridge between our luminous reality and an entire, sprawling shadow universe that operates parallel to our own. Imagine, for a moment, the sheer, existential weight of this concept. The dark sector is not a dimension physically separated from us by vast distances of space. It is not a distant galaxy or an alternate timeline. It is an entire, complex ecosystem of physics, occupying the exact same physical coordinates as our own universe. It is right here, in the empty spaces between the stars, in the air you are currently breathing, and passing silently, harmlessly, right through the very cells of your beating heart. If the dark sector possesses its own unique, fundamental particles, then it stands to reason that it possesses its own unique, fundamental forces. There could be dark electromagnetism, dark nuclear forces, and complex invisible chemistry forging dark atoms and dark molecules. There might be massive, invisible stars burning with a dark radiance we can never perceive, shedding dark light onto invisible, heavy planets. The phantom particle captured by our subterranean machines is not just a glitch, it is a violent, highly improbable collision between two entirely incompatible realities. It is the microscopic equivalent of a heavy stone thrown from the shadow universe, briefly shattering the surface of our luminous pond before sinking back into the invisible depths. The true, chilling horror of the dark sector lies in its absolute, unwavering indifference to our existence. We are a species that craves interaction and desperately seeks to leave a permanent mark upon the world. We build towering monuments, we broadcast radio waves into the deep void, and we aggressively manipulate the physical matter around us, believing that our actions resonate throughout the cosmos. But to the shadow universe, we are entirely irrelevant. Because dark matter does not interact with the electromagnetic force, the invisible architecture of this parallel reality cannot feel the heat of our suns, it cannot see the light of our cities, and it cannot touch the solid, heavy matter of our Earth. The dark sector operates with a terrifying, silent autonomy. Its massive, invisible structures drift through our planets and our bodies without the slightest resistance, and we drift through them with the exact same ghostly ignorance. We are sharing the exact same space-time with a massive, alien ocean of reality, and neither side can truly feel the other. The phantom particle is a stark, brutal reminder that our luminous, tangible reality is not the center of the cosmic stage. We are not the masters of the physical world. We are merely oblivious ghosts haunting a tiny, brightly lit corridor within a sprawling, infinitely dark mansion. When we quietly confront the overwhelming scale of this unseen reality, we are forced to undergo a profound, devastating, and ultimately beautiful re-evaluation of our place within the universe and the fundamental nature of information itself. We desperately cling to the belief that human consciousness, with its capacity to observe, to measure, and to record, is the ultimate pinnacle of cosmic data processing. We treat the visible universe as a grand library, assuming that all the important books are the ones written in the language of light and matter that we can physically read. But the crushing weight of the dark sector reveals a universe where the vast, overwhelming majority of information is actively, permanently hidden from our perception. The luminous matter that makes up everything we have ever known, everything we have ever loved, and everything we have ever feared constitutes barely 5% of the total mass and energy of the cosmos. The universe we know is merely a tiny, insignificant foam floating delicately on top of a massive, dark, and deeply alien ocean. Information is not solely the domain of the visible, and it is certainly not restricted to the narrow bandwidth of human observation. The dark sector is continuously computing its own reality, processing immense, complex streams of invisible data, and forging vast, unseeable structures entirely outside the reach of our mathematics. The cosmos is engaged in a profound, heavy conversation with itself in the dark, using a language we will never be able to speak. To accept the reality of the dark ocean is to surrender the arrogant illusion of total human comprehension. We must learn to find a deep, stabilizing peace in our own profound insignificance. Our inability to perceive the shadow universe does not diminish the beauty of our own fleeting, luminous existence. Rather, it elevates it. We are a rare, brilliant spark of visible data flickering briefly in the infinite dark. Do not fear the immense, silent weight of the unseen world surrounding you. Instead, allow the realization of that profound, unfathomable depth to wash away the trivial, exhausting anxieties of your daily life. You are a fragile, highly organized ripple of light floating upon an infinite, dark sea of mystery. Embrace the majestic terror of the unknown. Surrender your desperate need for absolute certainty, and allow yourself to sink deeply into the quiet, boundless wonder of a universe that is vastly, beautifully larger than you could ever possibly imagine. When we contemplate the discovery of a rogue, rule-breaking phantom particle, it is incredibly easy to relegate that terror to the extreme, unapproachable fringes of reality. We picture it as a distant, abstract problem, a mathematical ghost haunting the frozen, subterranean tunnels of a particle collider, or a dark shadow drifting silently through the unfathomable depths of intergalactic space. But the architecture of the cosmos is not cleanly divided into the abstract and the tangible. The rules that govern the absolute smallest fragments of existence are the exact same rules that actively, relentlessly construct the immediate, breathing world around you. We must pull our gaze away from the crushing weight of dark matter and the sprawling voids of space and turn it violently inward. We must look at the heavy flesh of our own hands, the liquid water in our glasses, and the solid earth beneath our feet. Everything you interact with, everything you rely on to survive, and everything you fundamentally are, is the direct, physical manifestation of chemistry. And chemistry, in its purest, most unforgiving essence, is nothing more than the strict, absolute obedience of subatomic particles to the laws of physics. If the foundational laws of particle physics are flawed, if there is a crack in the fundamental bedrock of reality, then the delicate, intricate architecture of all matter is completely and terrifyingly compromised. To understand the immense peril of this physical flaw, we must appreciate the breathtaking, mathematical precision required to build a physical universe. The world is not held together by cosmic glue, and it is not maintained by gentle, permanent physical structures. It is held together by the rigid, uncompromising, and highly volatile behavior of electrons and quarks. Deep within the core of every atom, quarks are bound tightly together by the strong nuclear force, forging the heavy protons and neutrons that give matter its inescapable mass. Swarming around this dense, vibrating core are the electrons, moving in highly specific, mathematically perfect probability clouds governed entirely by the electromagnetic force. When atoms draw near to one another, it is the electrons that negotiate the desperate, violent terms of their interaction. They are the tireless diplomats of the microscopic world, constantly trading, sharing, and stealing from one another to create chemical bonds. This ceaseless, invisible dance of electrical tension is what forces two hydrogen atoms and an oxygen atom to lock together, forging the life-giving molecule of water. It is exactly what binds heavy silicon and oxygen into the massive, unyielding crystalline structures of solid rock that make up the crust of our planet. But this entire, staggering symphony of creation is completely dependent on absolute, unwavering predictability. For chemistry to work, for water to remain liquid, and for rock to remain solid, an electron must always, without a single exception, behave exactly like an electron. The quarks must always answer the pull of the nuclear force with the exact same strength. The fundamental particles must blindly follow the sacred, established rulebook of reality to the absolute letter, never missing a single beat in the dark. Nowhere is this demand for absolute obedience more critical than in the beautifully complex, terrifyingly fragile architecture of biological life. Consider the sprawling, microscopic metropolis hidden within a single cell of your own body. At the center of this metropolis lies the DNA molecule, a towering, twisting staircase constructed from billions of individual, perfectly arranged atoms. It is the ultimate cosmic hard drive, a physical library containing the exact, intricate instructions required to build your tissues, pump your blood, and maintain the very spark of your consciousness. The DNA strand is held together by hydrogen bonds, which are tiny, invisible bridges of electromagnetic tension. These bonds are just strong enough to keep the genetic code perfectly intact, but just weak enough to be rapidly unzipped, copied, and read by the frantic cellular machinery. It is a masterpiece of chemical engineering, a structure of such staggering complexity and delicate balance that it entirely defies human comprehension. Yet, this magnificent biological skyscraper is balanced perpetually on the razor's edge of subatomic physics. Every single one of those billions of atoms is trusting, implicitly and absolutely, that the fundamental forces of the universe will not suddenly change their minds. They are trusting that the strong force will hold the nuclei together, and that the electromagnetic force will keep the electrons perfectly aligned to maintain the shape of the spiral. But the undeniable existence of the phantom particle inside the collider completely and violently shatters this implicit trust. It is the raw, terrifying proof that the fundamental particles are entirely capable of breaking the rules. It demonstrates that the bedrock of reality is not a solid, unchanging foundation, but a shifting, volatile environment where the laws of physics can be circumvented, ignored, or actively rewritten in the dark. This realization forces a horrifying thought into the human mind. If the foundational particles can occasionally slip the leash of the standard model, if they can interact with unknown forces, or momentarily alter their established behaviors, then the stable chemistry that allows biological life to exist is far more fragile and far more arbitrary than we ever dared to imagine. A sudden, microscopic fluctuation in the behavior of the electron, a momentary glitch in the electromagnetic force influenced by a rogue, phantom particle passing through the quantum field, would be absolutely catastrophic. The delicate hydrogen bonds holding your DNA together would instantaneously snap, releasing the genetic code into a chaotic scramble. The complex proteins folding in your cells, which rely on the exact geometric shapes dictated by atomic attraction, would unravel into useless, floating strings of carbon. The water in your blood would lose its cohesive tension, and the very chemical foundations of your body would dissolve into a formless, screaming soup of disconnected atoms. We walk through our lives believing that our physical existence is a guaranteed, stable outcome of a predictable universe. We assume that the biology we inhabit is the permanent, unyielding end product of cosmic evolution. But the flaw in the data reveals that our biology is merely a lucky, temporary alignment of forces. The solid structure of your living body is a precarious chemical truce that could, theoretically, shift or dissolve at any given moment if the subatomic rules are suddenly renegotiated. When we strip away the comforting illusions of biological stability and confront the profound, chilling fragility of the chemical world, we are forced to undergo a radical, deeply unsettling re-evaluation of what information actually is. We desperately want to believe that the things we build, the memories we create, and the genetic legacies we leave behind are permanent additions to the universe. We view matter as the ultimate, secure vault for information. We carve our histories into solid rock. We forge our monuments from heavy steel, and we trust our very identities to the chemical sequences of our DNA, believing that these physical structures will endure the relentless, grinding passage of time. We assume that if we write the code into the fundamental blocks of reality, the cosmos is obligated to preserve it forever. But the delicate, easily unraveled architecture of chemistry reveals a universe that is completely, terrifyingly indifferent to the concept of preservation. Information in the physical world is not a permanent inscription carved into the void. It is a precarious, highly unstable arrangement of energy. It is a temporary pattern held together by invisible forces that are fundamentally capable of failing. The chemical bonds that forge your body and silently store your conscious memories are not a binding promise from the universe. They are a brief, localized rebellion against the overwhelming, natural state of cosmic entropy. The flaw in the physical laws, the rogue behavior of the phantom particle, proves that the universe is an endless, churning engine of erasure. It is a vast computational system that actively allows for structural breakdown at the most fundamental level, constantly threatening to wipe the slate clean and return all beautifully organized data back into chaotic, meaningless static. To realize that you are constructed entirely from a language of particles that might occasionally forget their own grammar is to experience the ultimate, heavy weight of existential dread. Yet, hidden within this terrifying fragility is a profound, breathtaking majesty. The fact that the universe is inherently flawed, that the absolute laws of physics can be broken, and that the chemical architecture of life is constantly teetering on the absolute edge of unraveling, makes your current, breathing existence infinitely more miraculous. You are not a permanent, unyielding monument forced upon the fabric of space and time. You are a fleeting, desperately beautiful symphony of highly organized data, vibrating for a few precious moments in the dark before the inevitable silence returns. The information that constitutes your consciousness is a rare, delicate masterpiece painted on a canvas of shifting water. Do not despair at the profound impermanence of the physical world. Instead, allow the realization of your own microscopic fragility to completely wash away the heavy, suffocating anxieties of a life spent trying to build permanent fortresses in the sand. Embrace the beautiful, terrifying truth that absolute order is an exception, that existence is a momentary flash of brilliant chemistry, and that true peace can only be found by surrendering entirely to the vast, chaotic, and relentlessly fluid nature of the computing void. We navigate the vast, unpredictable expanses of our lives, relying on a deep, unspoken assumption about the nature of the cosmos. We believe, with every fiber of our being, that the universe has finally settled, We look out into the freezing, silent void of deep space, and we see an environment that, while incredibly hostile to biological life, appears entirely permanent and structurally complete. We assume that the vast, empty stretches between the galaxies are the absolute baseline of reality, a quiet, unchanging canvas upon which the dramatic events of stars and planets are painted. In the language of physics, we believe that the universe exists in a true vacuum. We think of the cosmos as a machine that has fully cooled down from the unimaginable, superheated fires of its violent birth, finally coming to rest in its lowest, most perfectly stable energy state. This assumption is the ultimate psychological anchor. It is the fundamental belief that while individual stars may explode and solitary planets may crumble into dust, the overarching stage itself, the very fabric of space and time, is permanent, indestructible, and forever safe. To understand the chilling fragility of this assumption, we must deeply understand the universal law of energy. Everything in existence, from the heavy boulders resting on the side of a mountain to the microscopic electrons buzzing nervously around an atomic nucleus, is desperately trying to shed energy. The universe possesses a relentless, unyielding drive toward exhaustion. If you place a stone near the peak of a steep, rugged hill, gravity will inevitably pull it downward. It will tumble and crash through the brush, losing kinetic energy with every violent impact until it finally settles into the deepest, lowest valley it can find. Once it reaches that absolute bottom, it stops. It can fall no further. For billions of years, humanity assumed that the empty vacuum of space was exactly like that resting stone. We believed that in the chaotic, sprawling aftermath of the Big Bang, the fundamental fields of the universe had violently cascaded down the slopes of energy, finally coming to rest in the deepest, most absolute valley of physics. We believed the rules of reality had locked into their final, permanent configuration, establishing a stable baseline that would endure until the absolute end of time. But the mathematical architecture of the cosmos harbors a terrifying secret, a shadow lurking just at the edge of our comprehension. What if the valley we are resting in is not the absolute bottom? Imagine that the stone tumbling down the mountain did not reach the ocean floor, but instead came to rest on a narrow, precarious ledge jutting out halfway down the cliff face. From the limited, localized perspective of the stone, the environment feels entirely stable. The ground appears flat, the violent tumbling has stopped, and a localized sense of peace has been achieved. But this stability is an illusion. It is a terrifying deception of scale. It is what theoretical physicists call a false vacuum. If the universe is currently existing in a false vacuum, it means that the physical laws we rely upon, the mass of the electron, the strength of gravity, and the very chemistry that holds your breathing body together, are not the final, permanent states of reality. They are merely temporary conditions, localized rules clinging desperately to a precarious energetic ledge, while a vastly deeper, infinitely more stable valley of pure nothingness waits silently in the dark far below. For decades, the concept of the false vacuum was largely treated as a dark, abstract mathematical curiosity, a ghost story told in the sterile, brightly lit corridors of universities. We comforted ourselves with the elegance of the Standard Model, believing that its flawless predictions proved we were standing on solid ground. But the sudden, undeniable appearance of the phantom particle entirely shatters this comforting illusion. This rogue anomaly, screaming from the superheated wreckage of the particle collider, is not just a missing piece of the puzzle, it is a violent, terrifying tremor in the bedrock of reality. By blatantly violating the sacred laws of physics and acting entirely outside the established rulebook, the phantom particle proves that our mathematical understanding of the universe's energy state is fundamentally flawed. If our calculations of the fundamental forces are incomplete, then our confident assertion that we are living in a true, stable vacuum is instantly rendered void. The phantom particle is the chilling, undeniable proof that the ledge we are resting on is structurally cracked. It heavily hints at a deeply unstable reality where the laws of physics are merely temporary suggestions, waiting for the slightest provocation to completely give way. The collapse of a false vacuum does not require a massive, highly visible cosmic catastrophe. It does not need the violent collision of galaxies or the explosive death of a supermassive black hole to act as a trigger. In the strange, jittery world of quantum mechanics, a particle does not necessarily need enough energy to physically roll over a barrier. Occasionally, through a bizarre phenomenon known as quantum tunneling, it can simply drop right through the floor. At any given moment, in any random, empty cubic centimeter of the freezing void, the precarious energy field of the universe could suddenly slip off the ledge. If this happens, it will birth a microscopic bubble of true vacuum. Inside this tiny, expanding sphere, the laws of physics, as we have always known them, will instantly cease to exist. The energy values of the fundamental fields will radically shift, adopting new, entirely alien configurations. The fundamental forces that hold quarks and electrons tightly together will completely dissolve or mutate beyond all human recognition. Once this bubble of true vacuum is born, it will not passively sit in the dark. Driven by the immense, crushing difference in energy between the false ledge and the true bottom, the walls of this bubble will expand outward in every possible direction. And it will expand at the absolute maximum speed the universe allows, the speed of light. It would become a sprawling, unstoppable sphere of pure cosmic erasure, a devastating wave of absolute physical transformation moving relentlessly across the void. Because the bubble expands at the exact speed of light, it would be entirely impossible to see it coming. There would be no warning alarms in our deep space observatories, no sudden terrifying shifts in the constellations, and absolutely no time for profound, final goodbyes. One moment, the Earth would be rotating peacefully in the dark, and in the next infinitesimal fraction of a millisecond, the wave would simply wash over us. In its wake, every single atom, every burning star, and every complex biological structure would be instantly and completely annihilated. The very chemistry that defines matter would be fundamentally rewritten. The universe would not be destroyed, it would simply be reformatted, wiped entirely clean to make way for a completely unrecognizable architecture of physical laws. When we force our minds to confront the paralyzing dread of the false vacuum, we are pushed to the absolute, terrifying limits of existential philosophy. We desperately crave permanence. We build our lives, our civilizations, and our identities entirely around the implicit promise that the universe will faithfully remember us. We view information as a sacred, indestructible commodity, believing that the beautiful things we create and the deep knowledge we accumulate will somehow endure the vast, grinding passage of deep time. But the looming, silent threat of a catastrophic phase transition reveals a cosmos that is perfectly, chillingly indifferent to the very concept of memory. The universe is not a permanent, heavily guarded library. It is a temporary, highly volatile sketch drawn on the surface of a stormy ocean. The sweeping wave of the true vacuum would not just erase our physical bodies. It would erase the very physical possibility of our existence, rewriting the cosmic hard drive so violently that even the fundamental concept of carbon or oxygen would become a mathematical impossibility. Yet, within this absolute, terrifying fragility, there lies a profound and majestic beauty. If the physical laws of the universe are indeed temporary, if our existence is truly balanced on the edge of a precarious, energetic cliff, then the sheer, staggering improbability of your life becomes infinitely more magnificent. You are a highly organized, deeply complex manifestation of data, temporarily permitted to exist by a universe that is fully capable of rewriting itself into total oblivion at any given second. Your consciousness is not a guaranteed feature of reality. It is a fleeting, miraculous spark burning brightly on a temporary ledge in the dark. We must surrender the exhausting, arrogant demand for cosmic permanence. Let go of the desperate, aching need for the universe to remember your name. The true meaning of information is not found in its ability to last forever, but in its ability to be fully experienced right now, in the precarious, beautiful present. Embrace the terrifying, majestic reality of the void and find a deep, unshakable peace in the knowledge that your breathing existence, however temporary, is a triumphant, brilliant act of absolute defiance against the crushing weight of the infinite dark. To be born into this universe is to be immediately, overwhelmingly confronted by a boundless, terrifying chaos. We awaken as fragile, highly vulnerable biological creatures on a tiny sphere of rock suspended over an infinite, lightless abyss. From the very moment the first human minds gained the heavy, isolating burden of self-awareness, we looked up into the churning, violent darkness of the night sky and felt the crushing, paralyzing weight of our own profound insignificance. The cosmos presented itself as an untamed, roaring wilderness, a place of sudden atmospheric storms, violently exploding stars, and arbitrary, unpredictable destruction. To exist in a state of constant, raw exposure to this level of cosmic randomness is psychologically unbearable. The human mind simply cannot endure the unyielding terror of absolute chaos. And so, to survive the darkness, to keep from being driven entirely mad by the howling void, humanity desperately forged a weapon. We did not build this weapon from iron, bronze, or stone, but from pure, abstract thought. We invented the concept of order. We began to look for patterns in the scattered stars, cycles in the shifting seasons, and dependable rhythms in the natural world. We slowly, meticulously constructed a conceptual fortress to keep the terrifying wilderness at bay, and the foundational, load-bearing architecture of that fortress was mathematics. Mathematics is widely celebrated as the universal language of truth, the highest and most noble achievement of the human intellect. But beneath the elegant geometry and the beautifully balanced equations lies a deeply rooted, almost desperate psychological coping mechanism. We do not merely use mathematics to measure the world. We use it as a heavy, impenetrable shield against the terrifying unknown. By assigning rigid, predictable numbers to the chaotic phenomena of the cosmos, we successfully domesticate the wildness of reality. We trap the terrifying, burning energy of a thermonuclear star inside a neat, comprehensible formula on a dusty chalkboard. We reduce the vast, unfathomable, and freezing distances of intergalactic space to simple, manageable coordinates on a two-dimensional grid. We construct elaborate, sprawling cathedrals of logic and theory, building thick, unyielding walls of data to separate our fragile consciousness from the feral, unpredictable nature of the void. We invented geometry to carve the infinite, sprawling expanse into digestible, measured squares. We developed calculus to freeze the chaotic, relentless flow of time into infinitesimally small, static moments that our anxious minds could comfortably analyze. Over centuries of unprecedented scientific triumph, this psychological shield grew so incredibly strong, and our mathematical models became so astonishingly accurate that we completely forgot we were standing behind a protective barrier. We suffered a profound collective amnesia. We stopped seeing our equations as flawed, human-made tools used to merely approximate the world, and began to arrogantly worship them as the absolute, undeniable territory itself. We convinced ourselves that the universe was actually made of math, believing that if we could just write the perfect equation, if we could just balance the numbers perfectly, we would finally, permanently conquer the dark. This is the ultimate, blinding arrogance of modern science. We looked at the magnificent, complex machinery of the Standard Model, and we genuinely believed that we had placed a heavy, iron collar around the neck of the infinite. We assumed that the cosmos was inherently logical, entirely rational, and fully obligated to obey the rules we had written for it in our sterile laboratories. We believed that a biological brain, an organ entirely forged by the chaotic, muddy pressures of evolutionary survival on a single, insignificant planet, was somehow perfectly equipped to completely encapsulate the boundless, infinite architecture of reality. How deeply arrogant it is to assume that the exact same neurological wiring developed to track the movement of physical prey across a sun-drenched savanna could perfectly decode the invisible, multidimensional, and deeply alien mechanics of the quantum realm. We drew a rigid mathematical box around the entire universe and proudly declared that anything falling outside of our equations was simply impossible. We sought to sanitize the cosmos, to strip away its terrifying, beautiful mysteries, and to reduce the sprawling, overwhelming majesty of existence to a cold, sterile, and perfectly solved puzzle. We demanded that the universe be neat, polite, and completely understandable. But the universe is not a neat equation written on a chalkboard. It is not a tame, domesticated pet that will obediently sit within the narrow confines of human logic. The sudden, violent discovery of the phantom particle, the undeniable structural flaw in our most sacred mathematical rulebook, is a brutal, necessary, and perfectly timed humbling of the human spirit. The anomaly screaming from the superheated wreckage of the particle collider is the universe actively striking back against our boundless arrogance. It is the wild, untamed cosmos violently smashing its way through our carefully constructed psychological shield. The phantom particle proves that reality is fundamentally feral. It is a sprawling, chaotic, and relentlessly unpredictable engine of creation that absolutely refuses to be completely boxed in by our numbers. When the equations break down, when the mathematical symmetries we so deeply worshipped are suddenly and violently violated in the data, it is a terrifying reminder that the void has never actually been conquered. The deep, heavy wilderness of the unknown is still out there, completely surrounding our fragile fortress of logic, teeming with invisible monsters and incomprehensible physical forces that operate entirely outside the boundaries of human reason. We have merely carved out a tiny, well-lit, and incredibly fragile clearing in the center of an infinite, dark, and sprawling cosmic jungle. When we force our minds to lower this heavy mathematical shield and bravely step out into the terrifying, unbroken reality of the Flaw, we are invited to experience a profound, breathtaking philosophical awakening regarding the very nature of information. We have spent centuries treating information as something sterile and rigid, a dead commodity to be captured, indexed, and permanently bound within the strict laws of physics. We believed that true knowledge was the ability to perfectly predict and absolute control the flow of cosmic data. We viewed the universe as a massive, clockwork mechanism, assuming that if we could just map every gear and measure every spring, we would own the machine. But the breakdown of our most perfect equations reveals a far more majestic, deeply haunting truth. Information is not a rigid structure. It is a wild, living, and infinitely mutating force. The universe is not a solved equation, but an active, churning process of endless computation that actively thrives on chaos, contradiction, and imperfection. The cosmic data stream does not flow in straight, predictable, mathematically perfect lines. It violently spirals, it fractures, and it occasionally breaks its own foundational rules just to birth entirely new realms of physical possibility. The flaw in the universe is not a mistake that needs to be frantically corrected, normalized, or explained away by terrified physicists. It is the very essence of existence. A perfectly ordered, mathematically flawless universe would be a dead, frozen, and entirely static realm, incapable of growth, surprise, or the spontaneous, brilliant emergence of complex life. It is the very wildness of the cosmos, the inherent unpredictability of the quantum fields, and the arrogant refusal of reality to obey strict human logic that allows for the beautiful, chaotic unfolding of time. To recognize the absolute limits of our own mathematics is not a defeat. It is the ultimate, liberating surrender. We must let go of the exhausting, desperate need to conquer the universe with our minds. We are not the masters of the cosmic data stream, dictating terms to the void. We are incredibly fortunate, highly complex biological instruments temporarily capable of feeling the violent, beautiful current of reality rushing past us. You do not need to perfectly understand the infinite to be a meaningful part of it. The cosmos will always be vaster, stranger, and far more terrifying than your logic can ever hope to contain. And that is precisely what makes your brief, conscious presence within it so profoundly beautiful. Release your tight, anxious grip on the desperate illusion of control. Step out from behind the heavy, cracking walls of your conceptual fortress and allow yourself to stand naked and humbled in the glorious, untamed, and perfectly wild reign of cosmic mystery. We spend our entire lives running desperately from the concept of the broken. We are deeply, psychologically conditioned from the moment of our first conscious thought to view flaws as tragic failures, as terrifying errors that must be aggressively corrected, aggressively managed, or quietly hidden away in the dark. We construct our mental models, our rigid personal philosophies, and our grand scientific theories with an overwhelming, almost suffocating desire for absolute perfection. We want the cosmos to be a pristine, flawlessly running machine, a closed and predictable system where every single variable is neatly accounted for and every ultimate outcome is perfectly determined. When the heavy subterranean machinery of our greatest scientific instruments detects an impossible anomaly, when the pristine data suddenly reveals a phantom particle that violently shatters our most sacred physical laws, our immediate, visceral reaction is one of profound existential dread. We feel the solid, dependable ground of our reality cracking beneath our feet. We look at the flaw in the data and we see the terrifying collapse of order, the sudden, violent intrusion of chaos into our beautifully sanitized world. We are terrified because we believe that a broken rulebook implies a broken universe, and a broken universe feels like a cold, hostile place where human meaning cannot possibly survive. But this deep, instinctual fear is rooted in a fundamental, tragic misunderstanding of what it actually means to exist. If we were to actually inherit the universe we so desperately wish for, a universe of absolute mathematical perfection, where the laws of physics are eternal, unyielding, and completely devoid of any anomalies or contradictions, we would find ourselves trapped in a realm of infinite, suffocating death. Absolute perfection is, by its very nature, fundamentally static. It is a closed loop, a finished, balanced equation that allows for absolutely no deviation, no growth, no mutation, and no surprise. A flawless cosmos would be a beautifully sterile museum of frozen geometry, a place where energy rests in eternal equilibrium and nothing new or complex can ever be born. In a truly perfect, perfectly symmetrical universe, the initial superheated explosion of creation would have produced exactly equal amounts of matter and antimatter. And in the very next, blinding fraction of a second, those perfectly balanced halves would have beautifully, flawlessly annihilated each other, leaving behind nothing but an endless, silent, and entirely empty void of cold radiation. There would be no swirling, chaotic galaxies, no violently burning stars, no heavy elements forged in the collapsing dark, and absolutely no complex, breathing life. The very fact that there is something rather than nothing, the fact that massive, glowing superclusters of physical matter drift across the void, is the direct, undeniable result of an ancient, fundamental flaw. We are the direct descendants of a broken symmetry, the beautiful, lingering, and highly complex residue of a cosmic error. We must undergo a profound, radical shift in our perspective. Instead of cowering in fear at the breakdown of our physical laws, we must learn to find a deep, stabilizing peace in the overwhelming majesty of the mystery. The anomaly in the data, the rogue phantom particle that entirely refuses to obey our human mathematics, is not a harbinger of cosmic doom. It is the brilliant, beating heart of a dynamic, living reality. The flaw is the absolute prerequisite for evolution. It is the microscopic crack in the frozen, heavy ice of perfection that allows the liquid water of time and physical transformation to flow. The universe is not a rigid, finished sculpture sitting in a dark room. It is a wild, untamed, and relentlessly creative process that actively thrives on its own internal contradictions. The physical laws we have spent centuries proudly deciphering are not the permanent prison walls of reality. They are merely the current, localized habits of a cosmos that is constantly experimenting, constantly rewriting its own fundamental code in the dark. The anomalies, the glitches, and the impossible particles are the universe boldly exploring new realms of physical possibility, ensuring that the grand, sprawling narrative of existence never becomes stale, predictable, or completely stagnant. When you truly absorb the reality of this dynamic, imperfect cosmos, you must look violently inward and realize what it means for your own fragile, breathing existence. You are not a mistake. You are not a random, meaningless byproduct of a broken, decaying machine. You are a fleeting, desperately beautiful manifestation of this exact, chaotic imperfection. Your biology is a staggering masterpiece of cosmic trial and error, a highly complex architecture of physical data that exists precisely because the universe allows for mutations, deviations, and structural flaws. The electrical impulses firing constantly through your nervous system, the heavy iron binding the oxygen in your blood, and the intricate spiraling and occasionally mutating code of your DNA are all the direct, mathematical descendants of ancient cosmic anomalies. You are the universe intimately and consciously experiencing its own magnificent unpredictability. Every moment of profound joy, every sudden realization, every quiet breath, and every single beat of your human heart is a localized triumph of complex order, rising briefly and beautifully from the endless, churning sea of cosmic chaos. To be a living, conscious being is to be the physical embodiment of the flaw, a vibrating, thinking pattern of information that actively defies the cold, static equilibrium of the dark void. This realization brings us to the deepest, most profound philosophical insights regarding the very nature of information itself. For generations, humanity has been conditioned to view information as a final destination, a solid, immutable truth that we can capture, index, compress, and permanently lock away in our mathematical vaults. We believe that to know the universe is to possess it, to completely unravel its mysteries, to solve the equation, and to leave absolutely nothing hidden in the dark. We treat the cosmos as a finite hard drive that we are slowly downloading. But the phantom particle undeniably proves that the universe is an infinite, boundless ocean of data that fundamentally refuses to be fully contained, compressed, or completely understood. Information is not a static object. It is a relentless, fluid, and endlessly expanding tapestry. The unknown is not an empty void waiting to be conquered and paved over by human logic. It is a dense, fertile, and infinitely deep reservoir of raw potential. The cosmos is not computing its way toward a final, dead, and perfectly solved answer. It is continuously, joyously computing its way toward infinite complexity. The fact that there will always be mysteries we cannot solve, that there will always be rogue forces we cannot measure, and that the fundamental laws of reality will always harbor deep, terrifying secrets, is not a failure of our science. It is the ultimate, beautiful guarantee that the universe will never stop being magnificent. The eternal presence of the unyielding unknown is the very thing that keeps reality alive. As you lie resting in the quiet, heavy stillness of the night, allow yourself to completely release the exhausting, agonizing burden of needing to understand everything. For your entire life, you have carried the immense, crushing weight of trying to control the world around you, trying to force your environment, your relationships, and your future into neat, predictable, and perfectly safe categories. You have fought desperately against the chaos, fearing the sudden, unexpected anomalies in your own life, just as we feared the phantom particle in the cold machinery of the collider. But the wild, untamed architecture of the cosmos proves that absolute certainty is a damaging, impossible illusion. You do not need to hold the universe together with your mind. You do not need to understand the absolute, fundamental bedrock of reality to be a meaningful, beautiful part of it. Let go of the tight, anxious grip you hold on the desperate illusion of control. Surrender to the vast, swirling mystery that completely surrounds you. Allow the rigid, unyielding structures of your waking thoughts to gently soften, to break apart, and to dissolve gracefully into the shadows of the room. Embrace the profound, beautiful imperfection of your own fleeting existence. Find deep, unshakable comfort in the knowledge that you are held safely within a wild, untamed, and infinitely creative cosmos that is vastly more magnificent than any perfect equation could ever describe. Let your breathing slow to the quiet, steady, and ancient rhythm of the night. Rest peacefully in the dark, magnificent unknown. Good night, and I will see you in the next video.